Kat Margulis, and you're listening to Passion Project. Today, I have with me Kathleen Tucker. Kathleen writes captivating stories with an edge. She's an internationally best-selling author of more than 30 books, including The Simple Wild, 10 Tiny Breaths, and Burning Water series. He Will Be My Ruin, Until It Fades, Keep Her Safe, and Say You Still Love Me. Her books have been featured in national publications, including USA Today, the Globe and Mail, Suspense Magazine, Publishers Weekly, Oprah Mag, and First for Women. Kathleen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here and
Yeah.
chatting.
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited to chat with you. You have had such an interesting trajectory with your publishing journey. I find it so inspiring, and I'm probably going to get it all wrong because I've just, pulled little snippets off the interweb. But I think that you actually got your start in self-publishing and then moved to traditional publishing and then moved back to self-publishing.
Yep, that's right. Kind of
Okay,
all
so
over the
I want to hear
place.
about it all. I want to hear about it all. So, I guess I'll move backwards. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to give up traditional publishing for self-publishing?
I was so to step back a little bit, when I started writing, it was just a total, it was a hobby. I had a corporate career, and this was just something I was doing really for myself without any goals or real aspirations to, to become a full-time writer. It was one of those, oh, what if this would be great, but it was never anything that really felt real or potential or possible. Um, and so when I self-published my first few books, again, still corporate life, everything going on, I just put them out there because that was at the time when self-publishing was really taking off as an acceptable form of publishing your books. That was when Amazon had become, it was really becoming big. The platform KDP was out. Their Barnes and Noble had its platform. All of these opportunities for the kind of the ebook era, and the ebook era itself had really erupted, and there were many bloggers. So that was right around the time where bloggers were playing a large role in helping boost people's careers and read and write about them and review. So it was a great time to be starting to write and to be starting to self-publish. But, the books that I put out were just out there just to see who would love to write or read them because I loved writing them. It wasn't until my fourth book that, which did extremely well, self-published. It was 10 Tiny Breaths. And then it was kind of a big snowball, a fast snowball, where I was approached by an agent and I was approached by a publisher, and at that point I had to make a decision because I couldn't do the corporate role and the writing role and be the mom. And it was a no-brainer at that point. So I signed a 4 book deal at that point, and then I, signed another 4 book deal. So I had, I think, 5 or 6 years, maybe not. Yeah, no, I can't remember exactly how many years, but there were a bunch of contracts, and I just kept writing for the publisher. And I learned a ton, and I had a fantastic editor. I learned so much about the craft of writing and about myself, and it was a good time. But at the same time, where we reached the end of that contract, I think both of us felt like it was better for us to go different directions. And at that point, I really wanted to get my hands back into self-publishing. I wanted more control. I wanted to have more flexibility. If you look at my portfolio of books that I've written, they are all over the place, right? Which is, from a publishing standpoint, not the easiest to market traditionally, right? You want to brand an author and you want them to be writing kind of the same thing throughout, so you can build that audience. So that's a bit challenging for a publisher, and in any case, I knew what I wanted, and I wanted to be for a bit, see how things go. And so that's the decision when I went back to self-publishing, call it in 2020. Yeah.
Wow, so cool. And I love what I'm hearing, about what drew you back to, and the kinds of decisions that you have to make, regardless of how you publish. and the implications and why you chose the path that you did. Uh, what advice would you give to a newbie author or somebody who's like, they've got this book, they're not sure if they should go for traditional publishing or self-publishing? Yeah, if you were to go back in time, what would you tell yourself?
Gosh, well, that's a really big question. I mean, there's because I do have people asking me regularly now, coming in and saying, "Oh, well, what do I do? Should I traditionally publish this book? Should I just go do this myself?" And I kind of always look at it from the perspective of, okay, what are you writing? Because there are certain genres that lend themselves better, I guess you could say, or to self-publishing. There's a market for it. You're able to reach readers more readily, with romance, even with fantasy at this point, which was not true. I don't know how many years ago, call it, 7 to 10 years ago, wasn't as big. Like romantasy right now is its own romance fantasy mix blend is such a huge thing in the market. Where 10 years ago you might not have been able to grab readers. um so there's that. There's also the element of how, what is your goal in publishing, and what are you trying to do? Because if your number one goal is to be on bookshelves, well, guess what? If you're indie pubbing, you're going to have a really hard time doing that. So I always step back, and I always tell people, just as a general advice or piece of advice, to write down your goals and your dreams.
Okay.
Two different things in my perspective, or my viewpoint is, you've got your goals of this is what I want to accomplish, and then there's your, you know, big goal, big dreams. It would be great if this could happen. Oh, can you imagine if this happened? Those are to me two separate things, because they're more difficult to achieve, and there's a lot of outside variables with your dreams, right? Whereas your goals is, you can set targets, you can set steps to achieve your goals potentially. So I always say to write those down, and then from there, I think that helps with figuring out what path you should be going on. There's also the element of how much you personally like to do. Do you have a business background? Are you business savvy? Or are you willing to hire the people who know how to do the things that you need to do in order to release a book?
Mhm.
Those are all kind of questions you have to have answers for, and
Yeah.
that will drive where you go, I think.
I really love what you said about be mindful of the genre, because it's not just about um I want to self-publish, or I want to traditionally publish, or I'm okay with putting in the work to market my book and to do everything on my own, and or I want the control, I don't want the control. But to be mindful, like, is there a market in that space for what you want to write, and that there's certain audiences that might skew or be more open to self-published authors. So I really love that. And then I agree with you, like, dreams versus goals. And it was really cool because you went, you just went for it. And then you did get, that author dream which is to get published. So
Right.
it's not to the exclusion. It's not to say that if you were to self-publish that you would never get traditionally published, that it can happen for you. But yeah, there's that difference between the goals and the dreams. I really love that. That's awesome. Um, what did you learn from traditional publishing that you were able to apply to self-publishing? Kind of for round two.
Well, so what I will say is that now, in where I am now, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a self-publishing. Again, I would say more hybrid, right? So I retain my North American rights, but I often sell my rights for foreign. I sell my audio rights to a publisher. I have several of my series with Penguin Random House UK, so that's English rights to Commonwealth, excluding Canada, which is, quite large. So I am working with publishers, but it's very much a partnership. It's very much a conscious decision on my part of, this makes sense for this book in this market. So I'm not, 100% self-published now by any means. I'm running a business as I feel I should run the business, and publishing how I feel I should publish.
Okay.
So that I will say. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
No, I think that's cool. I'm so fascinated by that. So, I mean, you have an agent still, and they're brokering those deals for
Oh
you, or
yeah.
you doing
Oh
everything?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so you were asking what I learned about traditionally publishing, which I've
Yes.
reapplied to self. Well, I mean, so one thing I will say that seems to be a misconception with a lot of new writers is that if they have a traditional publisher, their work is minimal, right? So you write the book and you put it out, you hand it to your editor, and then everything else is, magically it happens. Really, whether you're traditionally or self-publishing, you are doing a lot of your marketing yourself. Um, and so when I was with a traditional, well, I learned a lot before because I was working with PR companies, independent PR companies. So I was learning a lot about marketing. But then when I was in the publishing world, I learned a lot about their steps and stages, and how they would bring a book to life from having it finished to actually having it on shelf. Just the levels of editing, right? And copy editing versus line editing versus content editing, all of those phases and gates that you go through when you're traditionally published. So that was a learning experience. And I mean, you learn a bit from everything. I've learned a lot though from being more, I would say, from being self-published, because you're very in tune with the market. I find you have to be, and so you're always watching. And things move very fast now, especially in the self-publishing world, where you can turn a book around quite quickly, right? When you're with a traditionally when you are traditionally published, you are, finishing a book, and then you might not see it in the market for 18 months. You might not see it on bookshelves, right? So it's a very long, drawn out process. And there are certain things that traditional publishers or publishers do, with their gates, and yep, we're going to do the arcs. And yes, we're going to do it 6 months before or 3 months before. Yes, we're going to do all of our, trade reach outs. We're going to do all of these things. And when you're self-published, you're potentially looking at it from a different angle of, really reaching um, right to the readers directly, as opposed to relying on trade and this and that.
Love it. So let's go there. Let's talk about marketing as a self-published author, or hybrid published author. Uh, if you're using different strategies and tactics to reach the readers, what's really worked for you in terms of building that readership?
Um, I mean, arcs or galleys, those are always that's you have, that's bread and butter kind of thing. Like you want to get your book into people's hands. So no matter who I'm working with or whether I'm doing it myself, you're always trying to get those reviews. I mean, TikTok, everybody knows, I think at this point, how powerful TikTok has been for books and for reading. Um, so I have somebody kind of taking care of that for me for both my backlist as well as my potential future releases. Advertising, this is where you get into Amazon and Facebook and everything, and there's an element of that where I noticed before I was advertising, and after when I began advertising, I noticed a difference in sales. So that's another one. I'm trying to think here. Excuse me. Um, I mean, I do book signings. I do, but not many anymore. So I do a few, but I really I concentrate on trying to get as many books into people's hands as I can. Instagram is my favorite social media platform. There are so many social media platforms, and I feel like people drown in them. Um, and so what I've learned personally is pick the ones I like and stick with them. And I'm not all over I don't use Twitter at all. I don't go on there. Um, TikTok, I don't understand, so I have someone help me do that. And it can be overwhelming, right? And yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say is a watch out, especially for new writers coming in. it's very easy to become discouraged because you see a person put a book out and all of a sudden it's doing spectacular. Well, there was a lot of money behind that, and that is whether they're self-published or they're or traditionally published. There was likely a big push. I mean, so don't get caught up in that, or try not to get caught up in that,
Mm.
because I mean, I've seen people spending, heard people spending $30,000 to $40,000 on a release week with ads and things, right? I know it seems crazy. So you keep that in the back of your mind for new writers that try, new authors, to try to not get so discouraged, because there's money behind that machine.
I love that you said that about Twitter, because I'm like, yeah, I cannot keep up on all platforms. So Twitter and TikTok are kind of like at the wayside. So I love your strategy around that.
Yeah.
And that it's okay, because it can feel like a very writerly space, but it's just one more thing that's not writing books, for me.
Well, and that's what happens a lot of the time. I mean, we're trying to organize this session and you would message me, and then like I'd drop off the face of the earth and you'd have to message me a few weeks later, like, hey, did you get that message? And it's because I was on deadline. And when I'm
Yeah.
on deadline, nothing else matters, right? I have to get this book done. It has to
Yeah.
be into the editor, and otherwise there's all of this other stuff is just noise.
I have to ask you about that, because you're prolific. First of all, I don't think I would ever sign. I don't care how much money they offered me. You just sign a deal for 4 books, followed by another deal for 4 books. I'm like, no way. I don't know if I can pull that off. How do you write so many books? Like, how do you do this? How are you so prolific?
Well, I will say, for one thing, I will never ever again sign books like 4 book over 4 book deals ever. That was a learning. I won't do it. But I mean, at that time, it was very much, here's my deadline and I have to deliver. So, there wasn't an option, but yeah, I would not do that again. And again, so that's why when I say stepping back and doing, kind of taking control of my career and running it how I want to run it. Um, Again, I mean, I signed those deals. I signed those contracts. That's all on me. I didn't have to sign those. Nobody put a gun to my head. I signed those. So let's be clear. But I'm in a position where I decide what book I'm going to write next as I'm sitting down, and I'm not releasing, okay, here's the next 4 years and these are all the books I'm writing, because that to me takes the joy of writing, takes it
Mm.
away from me.
Yeah.
And I'm a mood writer and I'm a mood reader. And so I can't do that. I know I can't do that anymore. I don't enjoy it. So, and I've learned this over, what are we now, 10 years of full time writing. It's taken time for me to figure out how I work,
Mm.
and what works best for me. And I've changed as well. I wouldn't be able to write 3 books in a year now if you asked me to. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting. So it's like, you've taken control of that ship, and deciding which books and when and how long it will take. But I'm curious, like, how much do readers dictate? Like, how much do are you influenced by what readers want? If they're loving a series and they want more of that series, like, how does that weigh in, or how do you manage those expectations?
So I am pretty good at separating and putting a wall between what readers want and what I want now. Because you can get bogged down. Now, obviously, you want to write a book that readers want to read. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But for example, The Simple Wild, I wrote Marie. I wrote a book on Marie, who is a side character and not a very well liked character, frankly. And readers were like, I don't want that. And I said, well, too bad, you're getting it anyway, because I really want to write this book and I feel she's misunderstood. And I feel like if I give you this book, you might feel differently about her. But regardless, this is the book I want to write. And so I did. Fantasy, I went off and I'm now writing a fantasy series, which I'd wanted to write for many years. I started out writing fantasy. And again, I knew when I did that not, I have my romance readers, that not all of them are going to follow me, and I knew that this was kind of a starting over point to a certain degree. And this is
Mm.
I would take you that. but I chose to do that because it's what I wanted to do. And frankly, I was able to do it. I was in a position to be able to do that. So I think there's that balance too, of making smart decisions and doing what you can when you want, when you can do it as well.
Love that. Very, very cool. Yeah, it's so interesting just how dealing with the different audiences for the different books. And I love that you're so committed to your books and your characters, and you're like, I gotta tell the story, whether you guys like it or not. I
Yeah.
love that. I love it. Um, what what advice do you have for you know, for self-published authors, people who are like totally self-published?
Totally 100% self-published.
Yeah,
So
or
I
people who are thinking like that's the path. Like I'm not even going to think about this. I'm committed to this path. What should they consider, or what should they keep in mind as they move forward?
So what I would say, well, and I'm sure anyone coming out has heard this, that the market is it's pretty saturated. I mean, I came out at a great time, in terms of opportunity, because self-publishing was still fairly new. When I say self-publishing, I mean, as you know, there was the old vanity style publishing that everyone poo-pooed. And then when it became more acceptable is really where, the 2011-ish to, that's where I started. That's where when I self-published my first book. Um, so I would say, you know, I 100% fully agree, self-publishing is the path to go. That's awesome. Um, I would say if you can find somebody like a PR company, who has connections. So if you are completely new and you don't have a readership, I do actually support the idea of hiring a PR company who has, their built-in readership, who can get your book in arcs into readers' hands to review and to help promote. If you are just your own single person and you are jumping into the waters, it's tough. So I think that is actually a really good, help if you can find that. And it has to be the right PR company, and it doesn't have to be the PR company that costs $25,000. Like there's different levels of PR companies. Do your research, do something that fits for you, the type of book that you're writing. I do recommend that. I would say, and I would also say that, try not to be discouraged. To me, this is a marathon. This is, it's the long haul. I mean, and that's maybe if that's your goal, if you want to be a writer long term. When you sat down and wrote your goals versus your dreams, did you have this is what I want to do for the next 20 years? Or is it, I just want to put this book out and be done with it? I mean, those are two different paths. Most people don't go with the latter. But just know that, I mean, for me, I've noticed that every book that I put out helps build my career. So really writing more books, each book that you release does help your backlist, and that makes a big difference.
Love it. For people who want to pursue traditional publishing, do you have advice specifically for them?
Um, Gosh, you know what? I mean, it's again, it's another tough. That's a tough avenue, and it's changing all the time now. I mean, I was just talking to my agent recently, and she was saying how, now, agents are very often doing a lot the first step of editing, right? And there are people who are bringing manuscripts to agents that are already gone through editing. I don't know how I feel about that, but um, I think it's tough. I mean, try not to be discouraged again. Know that you have options. To me, I always look at it like, here's your book, you love your book. And, if you can't, if you were not unable to get this book traditionally published, would you put it in a box and would you put it under your bed? Or would you, um, do that but continue or write the next book, right? And that's what a lot of people who are very successful at traditionally publishing will tell you, that this wasn't my first book that an agent picked up. It was my fourth or my fifth or my sixth book. So try again not to be discouraged in that sense. Self-publishing, obviously, you have the flip side, because no one's telling you whether it's good enough. Except for the reader, basically. You're putting that book out there however you feel it, and and it's out, right? But that has positives and negatives too, because you might not be there yet as a writer.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's tough. I would say it's a tough industry. There's ups and downs no matter what, and you're going to face them. I've faced them. I've faced a few spots where I thought maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is not my calling. Yeah, but yeah, I think you put your pen down, or you close your computer and you go to sleep, and then you get up and you try again.
Love it. What are you excited about? Because it's like, yeah, you've got your ear to the street. You're hearing what are the trends. You're seeing what are the trends. You've been in it for so long. What are you excited about? Where things are headed in book publishing? Period.
Um, well, for me, I mean, I love, like as I said, I love fantasy. Started in fantasy, and so I'm so very happy that fantasy and romance fantasy, that world has really been able to come out. I love seeing more female fantasy writers back, call it in my 20s, when I was just reading fantasy and that was all that I was reading. They were all male writers, the adult fantasy, all male writers. You'd have YA fantasy, but to have an adult fantasy traditionally published in books on bookshelves, a lot of the books that were getting the most attention were the ones that were written by men. So I love the fact that over the last, call it 5 years or so, we're seeing much more coming from women and in the world. So that I'm really, really loving, because I really do actually love the female voice when it comes to fantasy.
Very cool.
So that I would say that's a big one. We're seeing so much in terms of different people's voices, diversity. That's playing a role. I mean, we're still not there yet, but there's a lot more out there now. I actually just gave my daughter, what was it called? Actually, I got it right. It was The Firekeeper's Daughter. I gave her that book to read on the cruise that we were just on, and she loved it. And that was, I didn't realize it was set in Canada, I think. And she was saying this was set in Canada, which was really neat. So I love seeing
Wow.
that.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard that. That's on my, I have a ridiculously long.
Oh, I know. I just keep buying books. I bought that book a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I was supposed to read it, and I never did.
Yeah.
Gorgeous book. And so I gave it to her, and then she could not put it down. And so I thought,
Oh.
oh, okay, now I have to read this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Love it. I love it. And then what about marketing channels? We talked about different social media platforms. What marketing platforms or spaces or avenues are you seeing or that you're really excited to explore or you think there's a lot of potential for authors specifically?
oh, I am probably not the right person to ask that. I stick with my like tried and true. Like I said, I love Bookstagram, so Instagram, I love that. TikTok, I'm terrified of, and I have someone help me with that. I always say make sure you have a newsletter and make sure you have a website. No matter what else is going on out there, make sure you have those things, because that you control and you own.
Mhm.
Um, but I am not the right person to say, here's the next great thing. That is not me.
Yeah,
I will rely on other people who are like experts to be able to say, let's try this and see what happens.
I love
And
it.
that, I mean, I think that's okay, because that's the thing. Authors sometimes feel like they need to be on everything, and they need to be on top of everything, and I see people doing Kickstarters for books, and then I'm like, well, what is this? I don't understand this. And it's coming at you from left, right, and center, and at some point I just shut down, and I just close my computer and walk away. So it can get overwhelming.
Yeah. Um, and well, I mean, you kind of touched on it with like this it's not really a resurgence, but like this you know, a growing welcome or whatever for fantasy and women written fantasy. What else are you experiencing from audiences that they're craving? Like what did the audiences want that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, what I've seen, a lot of, it's funny, a lot of readers, and I think that's kind of to a certain degree where romance has really exploded in the self-publishing market because there's no gatekeeping, and that's been the case for a while now, where people it started with self-publishing where readers wanted the steamy books, right? I mean, mind you, E.L. James, her series was not self-published. It was, I think, through a small press, but it started as fan fiction, right? Which was out there published on a platform and readers were gobbling it up. And so it's interesting to see, that was at that time, I think, as a regular contemporary romance novel, if someone were to bring a book like a lot that's out there in the market now to a traditional publisher, they'd be like, well, this is pushing boundaries. This is, this is too maybe too far. But readers want a lot of readers, not all readers. Some of them are very specific. They do not want the open doors. um, but there's a lot. Kind of the boundaries are I would say pushed much more for all different kinds of romance. There's a lot of fairy tale retellings and things like that, just taking like small ideas and spinning them into really cool places. And yeah, I would say there's just I just like the fact that all the freedom that the romance genre, because I do love romance. I talk about fantasy, or I have talked about fantasy a lot today, but I love romance. I love contemporary romance. I love a good women's fic romance blend where you have like a really robust story in there. Those are all stories that I love, and with some good steam. Those I love. And you're seeing that, but the funny thing is you're seeing a lot of that now. Traditionally published books, many of them are really pushing, and they're doing really well with those books now in the market.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Um, well, this has been amazing. I feel like I've got a million more questions, but I know that you have many more books to write. So is there anything you want to share with our audience before we close for today?
I don't think so. I think that this session is really great. I hope that readers, or sorry, viewers have been able to get a lot of value from all of your different experts and your different people who have come on to talk. I hope that they've found some value, and just I would say as a new author or a writer, an aspiring author, whatever you want to call yourself, just keep at it if that's what you want to do, because it's the long haul, but it's worth it when you get there.
Mhm. Love it, Kathleen. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching at home. And stay tuned because we've got more great interviews. See you soon. Bye.